Welcome back to the 2023 UNC Water and Health Conference. Are you having a good time? Fantastic. And again, it's Tuesday, in case you didn't know. I'm going to repeat a lot of the announcements, at least from Monday to Wednesday, because we will have new people joining us each day. So I do want to make sure that you all have access to the information. And so if you just arrived and this is your first day at the conference, would you wave at us and let us know that this is your first day? Yeah, we've got a few dozen, so welcome everybody, and we're glad that you have joined us for the conference. My name is Kata Lang, and I'm the Director of Programs here at the Water Institute and manage the conference, and so if you have any comments, I'd love to have a chat with you and speak to you and let me know how we can make the conference better. We are joined this year by over 1,500 virtual participants. And so every day I will get you to give a wave to the camera and welcome all of our virtual participants to the conference. They are joining us from around the world, from over 100 countries, and so we're so pleased to have them with us virtually. And we are also offering translation into French and Spanish. So many thanks to our translators online for doing a fantastic job. Today, again, we will have a daily virtual program, and it starts at 7:45 and it goes to 8:15 every morning, and it's hosted by Jan Willem Rosenboom, who's going to give us a wave from the front row. And so if you get a chance, tune in and get some exclusive content from Jan Willem and guests. And I also want to let you know about the virtual networking session that happens every day from 12:30 to 1 o'clock, and today we'll be talking about the plenary session. So we'll have Monica or Danielle join Aaron Salzberg and talking about what was presented during the plenary session. So join us for that if you're interested, but I'm sure many of you will be eating at that time. This is going the wrong way. And so again, this is a reminder to everybody. You have your hard copy program. It looks like this. You each should have received one. On the back, there is a space for you to write your name. So if you would go ahead and do that, because of course they all look the same, but if you lose yours, somebody hopefully will turn it in and you can pick it up from the Water Institute table. So make sure that you put your name on the back of your program and we'll get it back to you. And if you do have questions about anything related to the Friday Center or the conference, we do ask you to check the program first, and then feel free to stop by the Water Institute table or the Friday Center help desk, and we're happy to answer any questions and point you in the right direction. And again, there is a field trip on Friday. It begins at 1 o'clock, and you will meet at the front doors. There's only room, there's 32 seats on the bus, and it will take you to the Owassa water treatment and wastewater treatment plants in Chapel Hill in Scarborough, and it returns at 3 o'clock. So if you want to sign up for that field trip, the sign-up sheet is on the information board in the lobby area of the Friday Center. And again, just a reminder, here's a map of the Friday Center, and again, that map is inside your hard copy program. And just make sure that you are trying to be safe and respectful of the space and the people around you, as it is going to be a full week with over 750 people registered to participate here on the Friday Center campus. So let's make sure that we're being safe. And it's going awesome. Masks are also available at the Water Institute desk. If you're interested in wearing a mask in any of the sessions or any of the facilities, you can pick those up for free. Hand sanitizers are, you should have received a little personal spritzer, so that should be empty by the end of the week. But we also have hand sanitizer stations located around the Friday Center, so please also use those. And of course, there are restrooms where you can wash your hands. Twitter, now it's X, and so however you would like to engage us, you can. And now I would like to turn over to Rick Johnston, who will present the Sanitation Workers Research Award.
Thanks, Hedda. Good morning, Chapel Hill and the rest of the world, available online. Happy to be here today, and happy to have the opportunity to talk about sanitation workers, who play such a crucial role in the delivery of sanitation services, but often are forgotten, neglected, invisible, even though they face tremendous risks to their health, their safety, and their dignity. The issue of sanitation workers has gained prominence in recent years. I think in 2019, an important report was published that highlighted their situation and also called out that there's not enough evidence about their situation, their challenges, and what can be done to support and improve their rights. Following that, in 2020, the Initiative for Sanitation Workers was established as a collaborative partnership between ILO, WaterAid, WHO, the World Bank, and SNV. And this is aimed at advocating globally for the health, safety, and dignity of sanitation workers. Now, one of the work streams of the initiative has been to support research, which is essential to address knowledge gaps, the things we don't know about, and the things that are blocking progress. Last year, the initiative worked to establish a research agenda, and I think one interesting thing about that research agenda is it involved asking global sanitation experts and researchers what the research priorities would be, could be, should be. It also asked sanitation workers themselves what they thought the research priorities should be. And the two lists are completely different. It's fun looking at the report to see how they prioritize different things. In general, the global community is interested in policies and structures and systematic approaches, and a lot of the sanitation workers are more interested in practical, like the efficacy of personal protective equipment and systems to protect the health and safety of healthcare workers. So this just highlights the importance of doing research not on sanitation workers, but with sanitation workers and co-creation. And I'm happy to have the opportunity then to present the research awards. Also to thank the Water Institute for, again, allowing us to present these annual Sanitation Workers Research Awards here at the Water and Health Conference. And these awards are designed to recognize and support researchers working on this issue and to ask and encourage more people to take up research. This is the third round of research awards, and I'm going to be presenting the first two first place and second place awards. We don't have anyone in the room today to receive them in person, but they will receive their awards. So let me start then with our first place winner, Douglas Bulafu and team from Uganda, who presented an abstract this year about biohazard awareness and personal protective equipment utilization among sanitation workers in 9 cities in Uganda. So let's just give a big hand to the team in Uganda. All right, our second place winner, also from Uganda, also addressing subjects of personal protective equipment, but this time looking more at the workplace policies. How do workplace policies predict PPE-related knowledge and ownership among desludging operators? And Tony Sekamate and team are the proud recipients of place 2, so thank you. Congratulations. Now, in third place, we actually had a tie this year, so we're going to co-present 2 joint third place winners, and Dr. Laura Kohler from WaterAid is going to be presenting the awards. Let me start with asking Uttam Kumar Shaha from Practical Action Bangladesh Country Office to come to the stage to receive the award for their work on reviewing a transformative model for empowering and dignifying sanitation workers' lives in regional Bangladesh. Thank you so much. Okay, and our co-winner of the third place position then is represented by Prince Antwi Adjei, who is from the University of Energy and Natural Resources in Ghana, for their work on the risks associated with sanitation workers. They've made a quantitative assessment in Ghana. Congratulations. So you can read more about the initiative for sanitation workers on this website hosted by Susanna. You can also hear more about the work in today's session this afternoon at 1:30 in Azalea, where you'll be able to meet these prize winners and hear about their work in more detail. So let's just have one more round of applause for all the sanitation research workers. And I pass back to Kaida.
Thank you, Rick. And now I would like to introduce to you Ms. Tracy Wise, who will be the moderator for today's panel. She comes from USAID's Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. And over to you, Tracy.
Thank you, Kaida, and good morning to everyone here, as well as good afternoon or good evening to everyone who is joining us online. Really pleased to see you all today and excited to have this panel today on the fragile context. So our panel today is a focus on fragility, accelerating progress for WASH services in fragile environments. And we are going to have a really excellent keynote speaker that I'm excited, but first I did want to provide a little bit of context for our panel today. We heard in the plenary yesterday about conflict, and that's increasing. We heard about climate change that we're all well aware of and the increasing impacts that it has for us in our WASH programming across humanitarian development and peace programs. And we also heard about the increasing spread of climate change and other disease outbreaks. Within that, we looked at the donut as well, and the increasing recognition that equitable access must address populations everywhere, and that equitable access particularly includes these populations in fragile contexts. So we cannot overlook people living in conflict zones. We cannot overlook people who are living in these contexts and still say that we are achieving SDG 6, that we are achieving equity. We must address these populations to achieve that equity. And as I hope we all know, fragile contexts, they often have increased vulnerability to conflict, to climate change, and we see that really we must address them. And we know that we have weak governance, or we have things like de facto authorities. For those of you who may not have worked in these fragile contexts as much, often many of the things that we talk about as an enabling environment are missing. So that governance, if you can't work directly with the governments, if your local systems actors are weakened, then it really becomes extra challenging, and we want to dive into those topics today. So without further ado, I want to introduce Monica Ramos, our keynote speaker. And I would also like to welcome our panelists up to the stage, George Ackle, Will Tillett, and Haseeb Payab.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I know we have people joining from all over the world, so it's great to have all of you here in the room, as well as those joining online. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today and to provide these opening remarks. Really the focus on fragility and the push to really accelerate the progress for WASH services in fragile environments is something that is so important to the work that we do. So I'm Monica Ramos, I'm the Global WASH Cluster Coordinator, and I'm really happy to be here today, and it's great, thanks to DAI, to Tufts University, and to the Water Institute for having us today at the UNC Health and Water Conference, so thank you. The Global WASH Cluster, for those of you that may not be as familiar with it, is a multi-stakeholder platform. Globally, we have 90 members, and that comes from mainly humanitarian aid organizations, academia, as well as donors working in the humanitarian WASH sector. We also lead over 30 national coordination platforms in crisis contexts. So we have colleagues who, some are sitting here in the room today and also joined online, that have been cluster coordinators or information managers working in some of the most fragile states in the world. And so we also have somewhere between 2,500 to 4,000 partners on the ground. So we do have quite a global network, and we do keep a really strong approach in terms of the support that we provide to the coordination platforms to ensure that they are able to provide effective and accountable coordination. So it is quite a big piece of work that myself and the team pulled together from Geneva. Just to give an overview, the Global WASH Cluster was actually established in 2006. So it's one of the 11 humanitarian clusters. It's led and operated by the Interagency Standing Committee. So that sits under the United Nations. We, in our case, are hosted by UNICEF. And we operate under what is known as a reference module. So it basically outlines what we do in terms of co-coordination, the functions of core coordination, and also what that means for the provision of life-saving support in humanitarian crises. So there is a science to what we do. We are called upon either when crisis occurs or when a current crisis is ongoing, but it reaches a state of deterioration that bypasses what the national capacities can do. So we are invited into countries. We are activated by the countries, the authorities in agreement with, in the case of WASH, the authorities that are overseeing the water and the sanitation, the hygiene services. So we're really expected to do quite a few things when we come into that setting. We are expected to first strengthen system-wide preparedness. So it's one of the biggest things that we do focus on. We are also expected to enhance coordination capacity to really make sure that the operational response is really addressing the needs and the risk of what the affected population are enduring. And we're also tasked to provide clear leadership and accountability to drive humanitarian action. So a lot of times the best way to explain what we do as the cluster is the policies that exist, we operationalize that. We make sure that that gets to the ground, to the field, to make sure that it is really impacting the lives that are affected by crisis. So given the work that we do at the Global WASH Cluster, it's really inspiring to see all of you here today and also the global community that I know is online with us to come together and focus on the importance of accelerating WASH services, the WASH sector towards achieving SDG 6, as Tracy touched upon, particularly in fragile contexts. And I think that this is really the key piece that we'll be teasing out today and really looking forward to having the inputs from our esteemed panelists as well in terms of the work that they do. And this could not come at a more appropriate time. Currently, and actually this number is a moving number, we have 339 million people globally that are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection. That's an increase of 17% from last year. And there has been a steady increase over the past few years. And really more and more contexts are emerging daily. I think many of you are watching the news. Within the last 4 weeks, we had 4 new emerging crises happening globally on top of the some 30 or 35 that we are dealing with on any given day. So it is really intensifying in these fragile contexts. This in particularly, what it means for water and sanitation and hygiene assistance is that we have roughly 187 million people globally who are in need of humanitarian aid, provision of WASH services, life-saving services, because they are facing, as Tracy was mentioning, complex and protracted conflict and displacement, climate-related shocks and disasters, and large-scale public health emergencies. And sometimes we have all of that happening all at the same time. So it is really, really critical that we come together and really look at how we can add value, not only as the humanitarian action to the life-saving pieces of work that need to happen to have WASH outcomes, but also how we can work with development and peace actors to make sure that what we do is really delivering the results that are needed. And so really this business as usual of having this kind of approach where things are siloed is just not working anymore. And we have recognized the importance of having a new way of working. And this really focuses on for us at the Global WASH Cluster, fostering partnerships partnerships that increase collaboration across humanitarian assistance, development cooperation, and peace building. It really is taking us into a new dimension, because in order to address the underlying root causes of fragility and promote system strengthening, we can't do that alone. And so we do really need to establish partnerships. And one of the things for those of us that do work in fragile contexts that we know is that it is not a siloed process. There is a little bit of everything happening at all times within a fragile context. And that really does require all actors to come together and to work as collaboratively as possible, because effectively we are interconnected and we are complementary. So really looking at what can we do about this? We've been working for over a year or so now as the Global WASH Cluster is really trying to champion this idea of collective action for collective outcomes. So we want to really look at a framework that's able to optimize partnerships in order to reduce needs and risks, so take care of the humanitarian aspect of that, but also to achieve the longer term and sustainable development. And that's where the SDGs and the development work comes in, and ultimately to reach peace and stability. And so that's where it comes in, our work also on the peace building. We believe that through a well-coordinated approach for joined-up action, that's what we refer to the collective outcomes as, and by setting a concrete and measurable steps to be taken by humanitarian development and peace actors is really the only way to maximize gains, optimize resources, and leave no one behind. So we are really striving through the work that we do that's focused on life-saving humanitarian WASH to also reach the objectives of the SDGs, because we know it is important and we know we have to come together with other actors to make that happen. So we do play a central role because we provide that effective thought leadership and coordination in support of joined-up actions to reach collective outcomes. We advocate for bringing together the interagency coordination structures that exist to really ensure that it's guiding humanitarian action towards development cooperation, and that we're using this as the entry point to strengthen existing country-level processes and also providing the foundation for system-wide change. We know it's needed, and we are driving and championing this. Today, for example, we see this taking place in many countries in the world, fragile states such as Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Somalia, the state of Palestine, and Yemen. We've been working collaboratively through our coordination platforms to engage development and peace actors and to undertake joint context and risk analysis, complementary planning and implementation, and promoting recalibration of financing modalities, which can act as an enabler in the way that we come together and work together. In these contexts, while we do continue to provide the life-saving humanitarian WASH services such as water treatment, the delivery of safe water, emergency sanitation, and the provision of essential hygiene items to those that are affected by crisis, we also are still engaging with development and peace actors to see how we can make those pieces of work as sustainable as possible. We also engage with local and national partners, such as government counterparts and civil society, to strengthen leadership, coordination, and technical capacities in support of national strategies. So we really are aiming, again, to achieve longer-term and sustainable WASH outcomes, linking that to humanitarian response, preparedness, and resilience. The result of all of this, the common approach that we have been taking, really demonstrates the untapped potential of innovative partnerships and the type of transformative system-wide change that is possible within the WASH sector. So this is possible to do. And I think for all of you, this audience in particular, one of the areas that we could see collaboration as well is really through prioritization of data, of really understanding. This is an area that really speaks highly to us, is to have that data, but also to identify knowledge gaps and really what can we do collectively together to drive forward a research agenda that can support the work that not only the Global WASH Cluster is doing, but also our counterparts in development and peace. So again, we continue to advocate, we continue to promote effective, innovative, inclusive, and accountable coordination towards collective outcomes. that is across humanitarian development and peace. So we are reiterating the importance of us coming together, and we really believe that if we continue to push for this paradigm shift for improved collaboration across a diverse range of actors, because it takes all of us, we can demonstrate how this joined-up action for the collective outcomes is really essential, and it actually can reduce needs and risks, address fragility and system strengthening, and help all of us to reach the long-term and sustainable WASH outcomes that we would like to through the work that we are all contributing. So I personally am truly convinced that the WASH sector can provide leadership to accelerate the achievements of SDG 6, particularly in fragile contexts. And I think that that's really what makes it interesting, is that we can do something. And that we can really make sure that even given the current operating environment, that it is possible to come together, to work collaboratively. And we know that effectively, we have no other choice. We have reached a real tipping point in terms of the high level of crisis that exists, the needs that we see in these fragile states, and so it's really up to all of us. So I'd really like to thank all of you today for joining us for this session. I think it's a very important topic, and I'd really like to give a special appreciation for our esteemed speakers. I know that they'll have more bits and pieces to share with us today from their experiences, and again, we look forward on the behalf of the Global WASH Cluster to collaborate with all of you in the future. We're really happy to be here, and we're really happy to have had the opportunity to shed some light on the work that we do in the humanitarian WASH sector. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for those remarks, Monica. It was really great to hear about the importance of us all working together, and I'm excited to hear more from our panelists about that, as well as it really makes me feel proud of some of the work that USAID has been doing. As you know, we've now launched the new global water strategy, which has more emphasis on this coherence across the humanitarian development peace nexus, and as well as a new award called Fragile Waters, looking at this area. So really excited to hear your remarks on that and to get ideas from this panel. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel and hear a little bit more about all of you as to why you're up here on stage with us today. George, would you please give a brief introduction?
Good morning, everyone. I'm George. I work for the AI. Currently, I'm based in Lebanon. The AI is implementing in Lebanon the biggest USAID-funded water project in the portfolio, actually. It's called the Water Sanitation and Conservation Project. I'm happy to be part of this project. But why I'm here today is because of the Lebanon that we know now. As you all have been reading, Lebanon has recently been teetering on a self-inflicted economic collapse that has forced its local currency to plummet, has sent more than 85% of the population in 1 year to a multidimensional poverty, and has drained all foreign reserves at the central bank with an estimated loss of around $70 billion for such a small country. Not to forget the recent Syrian crisis that started in 2011 with an immense impact on Lebanon, because 12 million Syrians have been forcibly displaced, 5.4 in our region, and out of the 5.4, Lebanon is hosting around 2 million of them. So this is an increase in the Lebanese population of 50% overnight. Eating up on resources, putting more pressure on our already aged service networks in water and wastewater, competing on jobs with Lebanese people, and putting much pressure on municipal budgets who are already under budgeted and are already in a very dire situation. All this has put together the thinking of the Human-Development-Peace nexus in the context of our support to Lebanon and the support to the host communities in particular, and the water utilities, where this can become a very handy time or timely, actually, intervention by USAID and the AI to support the country in such a situation. Well, with all this gloomy picture, we think there are still lots of opportunities to work there. It's just that we need to be carefully designing them to make sure they are sustainable. And more than that, we need to have the enough funding for these opportunities to be run by the country and by the government. So there are opportunities. We are working on them. We are being a bit creative about it. It's the knowledge that we have about the country and the sector that's helping us. It's the strong team that we have on board who are pioneers in all the work that we do in Lebanon and the region. And I'm happy to be here and share with you this experience later. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Haseeb.
Thank you so much. Good morning. It's an honor and privilege to be here among you. Living in fragile state, every drop of water, every breath of air, and every moment spent in stability, peace, is a testament to human resilience against adversity. Fragile states like Afghanistan are faced with numerous challenges, which are formidable. Challenges that are internal, challenges that are external, challenges that are natural, challenges that are human-made. All these challenges definitely have disrupted the entire system, or will disrupt the entire system. These systems will take generations, particularly the service delivery, the WASH sector, the water sector, the energy sector, and so on. These challenges recently have intensified. The frequency, we are seeing increase in frequency of these natural disasters. Good examples are the recent flooding in Libya, recent earthquake in Morocco and Afghanistan. We have noticed that thousands of people died in these events. Not only that, the entire infrastructure, service delivery, water infrastructure, they were all destroyed. So we are in an era where conventional approaches to unconventional challenges will not work. Therefore, these challenges need to be tackled. And how? Humanitarian-focused approaches, they act like painkillers. So we need to work on the root causes and develop solutions that will completely eradicate these problems that we are facing. Development, climate change, peace, they're all long-term approaches that takes long-term time. So we need to merge these pieces together and work all together so that we can then have meet the humanitarian short-term goals and also meet the development long-term goals. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. We all have a lot to say on this topic. It's really important to us all. Will, please, a brief intro.
Thanks. Thanks very much, and it's a pleasure to be here. I was in Bangladesh last week, and I was awake at 2 a.m. this morning with sort of weird time zone differences. But so if it's okay, I might use some prompts. So I'm coming into this debate a bit more from a developmental background than humanitarian, although having worked a little bit in humanitarian response in the past. So I guess I'd describe myself in the WASH sector as a bit of a systems nerd, a WASH systems nerd, and it's applying WASH systems concepts and approaches in fragile states that I'll be keen to talk about a little bit today. So in my past role with, so by the way, I work with South Africa. In my past role with AgriConsult, did quite a lot of work on kind of systems conceptual frameworks, examples, documentation, and some training to organizations. And I became increasingly aware that there was quite a gap in terms of the documentation, the narrative, the frameworks around, in systems approaches, systems thinking. In the kind of resilience and the fragility aspects, a lot of the thinking had been done by development practitioners in more stable context, or even in sometimes unstable context, but the aspects of fragility may not have been so strong. So I think, I mean, you could almost call it at the time a little bit of a kind of fragility blindness. We talk about systems blindness, but a bit of fragility blindness. So from there, worked with a number of organizations on a discussion paper to try and look at kind of how could some of the systems thinking, concepts, frameworks, etc., be applied to be more relevant in fragile contexts. What kind of could work, what doesn't work, what examples are there, just to create a little bit of a debate. So Monica highlighted a number of really key things, I think, around some of the rationales for looking at evolving from business as usual approaches in humanitarian contexts. The need to bridge the humanitarian development divides, the longer-term approaches, the collective outcomes, etc. Also to increasingly strengthen and use country systems and avoid sometimes kind of a parallel delivery substitute approach. So I think all of that, in summary, highlights the potential key role for applying systems approaches in fragile states, and I'd say it's not easy, but it seems to be possible, and it'll be great to look at some of those examples today. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Will. And we'll stay with you. I think you provided us a great seg to our first question about, as you've mentioned, that system strengthening is increasingly being used to look at as the way to achieve universal access. And could you talk us through a little bit more about some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities of applying those approaches in the fragile context?
Sure. So I think, and again, I don't have all the answers, right? I think it's a very challenging topic and a very under-documented topic. So I think also to say that fragility is a very catch-all term, right? Every context is different. And so I'll make some generalizations in some of the challenges and opportunities, but I think every context is different, right? So I think some of the challenges, why it's hard, I mean, if it was easy, it would be commonplace in the sector already, right? So it's, I think from a funding side, Tracy, it's sometimes the funding is not conducive to taking a longer-term approach, right? There's short-term programming cycles, annual process of planning and budgeting, very kind of outputs-focused interventions, which may not be so conducive for more of a kind of longer, deeper systems approach. Also, often very high-risk, unpredictable contexts, which can mean, together with short-term projects with a lot of kind of delivery targets, almost incentivizing to do the lowest risk approach to implementation, which may not be using and working with country systems and local actors. It might just be cracking on and doing direct implementation, bulk procurement and supply rather than market-based approaches. Also, in some contexts where it's kind of protracted, chronically fragile, it might be that the actors that are there, some of the skill sets and mindsets within the country context may not be so kind of development-orientated, be so aware of some of the systems debates that may be more common in some more stable contexts. So I think there's a range of different challenges, and that's just sort of tip of the iceberg in terms of challenges. Also, the challenges of working with governments sometimes. You know, sometimes it can actually be quite hard or even possibly compromising core humanitarian principles of engaging with certain governments. Although I do sometimes think that is a bit overused as a rationale not to engage sometimes. But there are also a large number of opportunities, I think, with the increasing donor priorities, donor commitments towards things like localization, the grand bargain, interest and demand for understanding in proposals and things, well, what is the Nexus approach, etc. looking at exit strategies, increasing awareness and discussion around resilience as a central component, albeit a bit more focused on climate resilience. And then, as Monica says, kind of changes of things, really exciting things that are happening already in terms of the engagement of a WASH cluster with SWA counterparts, some of these kind of longer-term planning and kind of work towards collective outcomes is really exciting. So there's a lot of stuff that's happening already. I think also the opportunities around the shift towards cash and market-based approaches, which is becoming more popular or more common in the WASH humanitarian space, creates that opportunity and the need to work with and strengthen market systems. There's also really exciting stuff that's happening in terms of evolving service delivery models in this context. So, for example, in northern Uganda, looking at much more transitional approaches to water supply service delivery in long-term displacement context, displacement camps. I see Water for Good, Aduma here in terms of working in really challenging contexts for delivering sustainable services and how things like new technologies and remote sensing, performance-based finances, et cetera, can help to encourage that. I think, lastly, in terms of the opportunities side, is sometimes with kind of systemic shocks comes opportunities. So there might be almost a kind of reset button if there's a coup, a massive change of government, a big humanitarian event that may disrupt sort of more developmental programming. That obviously creates significant challenges, but maybe it creates windows of opportunities to lever some change in the sector. So I do think there's a number of opportunities to strengthen the Nexus aspect, and I think maybe we can touch on those in subsequent comments. So yeah, it's hard, but I do think it's possible, and we need to. I mean, what's the alternative?
Necessary, and also take on board the challenges with the donors. We are working on it. Change is slow, unfortunately. Haseeb, could you tell us a little bit more about some of the approaches that have been adapted to achieve sustainability and some of those successes that we've had?
Well, yeah, actors in fragile states, they can avoid silos and promote synergies through a different mechanism. One such mechanism is the integrated approach, integrated planning and programming, where all actors can come together and work together on joint objectives. A good example in Afghanistan that I can give, a good project, I mean, there are numerous projects, but one project that was implemented really successfully was the Strengthening Watershed Irrigation Management project, which was funded by USAID and implemented by DT Global. The project not only focused on physical activities, but also building capacity and awareness, not only focused on activities on lower watershed, but also focused on activities on upper watershed. Not focused only on institutional strengthening, but also collaboration and among different government agencies and donors. Among all these different activities in this project, the best activity was the mega irrigation project feasibility study. I'm sure you have heard the name of Pushtaba feasibility study. Currently, the Taliban regime is implementing that project. It's a more than 200 kilometers long canal with a width of 100 meters, and bringing more than 500,000 hectares of land and irrigation, and also supplying water to numerous districts and provinces which are lacking drinkable water. The other thing that's important is resource pooling. Resource pooling is also a collaborative approach where like you can bring different organizations together and combine their resources, whether it's financial resources, human resources, or material. In Afghanistan, there were like different donors, the World Bank, USAID, JICA, ADB. They all, they had portfolio of funds for capacity building, and they implemented capacity building projects on silo. So the impact was low. So the main point here was to how we can like increase the impact, how we can like reduce the redundancy. So we engaged with talks with all these donors and try to and ask them if we can like create a basket of funds where all these donors could put this money in this basket, and then with short-term and long-term goal that the government has, use this money in an effective way. Luckily, I mean, most of the donors, they got agreed, and implementation is definitely a point that has to be discussed as well. The other point is the policy alignment and institutional reform. This point was also raised in the panel discussion yesterday. In Afghanistan in 2021, we started to work on the national environmental policy, which was supported not only by UNEP, but also by USAID and the World Bank and other donors as well. And this policy, I mean, we conducted several workshops in different regions of Afghanistan, inviting huge numbers of actors and stakeholders, including academia, farmers, women, young government, private sector, water user association, and many others as well, in order to hear their voices, in order to look to problems and solutions that are localized. And we can like reflect them in these policies so that these policies can be effective. Definitely, I mean, there were challenges because some ministries, they were showing resistance. They were not willing because with such kind of policy and regulation, they have to like bring a lot of changes as well. So with such kind of policies, developing new policies or aligning policies, there will be different challenges that we need to address as well. And then once the policies are drafted, the next important point is to reform the institutions, change the structure. In 2017, we tried to develop a reform plan for the irrigation sector. We saw huge resistance as well here. I mean, there was no political will. The different ministries involved in the irrigation sector, they tried to oppose it. They didn't want to like make these changes because many irrigation projects were implemented through these different ministries, and they didn't want to give it. At the same time, employees, they were showing resistance because they were supposed to, I mean, they were lose their jobs or their TORs would change. And so there were numerous challenges as well. And lastly, the important point is the engagement of communities, local actors. Because the communities, they have the knowledge, they have the problems, and they can give you a good solution as well that you may have not thought about it. Unfortunately, in many states, in fragile states like Afghanistan, I mean, all the planning policy is taking place in centralized level, I mean, with the central government. So hardly you will find government agencies going and talking with local actors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Haseeb. I know we could talk, but I do want to make sure we get through and give George a chance to speak as well. Sure. And you really talked about some really important aspects of collaboration, of all the different actors involved, from communities through the government. Monica really touched on that as well. And George, could you talk to us more about how do we break down these silos, and what's your experience been in really helping both the humanitarian development and peace actors all work together to coordinate?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you allow me, I'll just like to give it some spice. It's like take you to the field, actually. Tell you what we are actually doing. It's not what we are thinking of doing and what has been successful so far. And we're not reinventing the wheel. We're equal to anyone here who have been dedicated to this sector and to working in this sector. It's just that we have smartly adapted some of the program to address the crisis that we are in now. And by doing so, we, instead of investing in heavy infrastructures that will become unsustainable, like to avoid the build and neglect topics, we invested in sustainable, renewable energy, because we are now faced with water utilities in Lebanon that have no money to operate. Facilities are there, millions of dollars of investments idle. Because of the currency devaluation, all the collection that they are doing can't even buy them fuel for the generators to pump water. So we wanted to work in making sure that the business continues, at least continue to provide water, access to water. We're talking about access to water. So we went into investing in solar energy in many of the facilities that are highlighted as being priority and serving the majority of the population. The same thing applies to the host communities that I have been talking about, where you have the overwhelming Syrian presence in informal settlements. They are not living in houses. They are in informal settlements, and in some communities, they outnumber the number of local people. In some communities, they go up to a double sometimes. So we are helping these very priority areas in keep on pumping water, provide access to water, equally to sanitation. Another thing that is very fundamental is, while you're working on addressing the crisis, you need to keep in mind the development perspective, and not two things that are prompt and that will finish when you finish. So we are working on a strategy for cost reduction that would last after we leave. So one of them is solar energy, which would reduce the energy cost that they initially had to pay to pump water. Second, we are working on non-revenue water, and by non-revenue water, I don't only mean the leaks that happens or that we detect while we're working in an area. So we selected pilot areas that can be easily replicated just to show them how to do it. Work on identifying leaks, identifying illegal connections that are sometimes much bigger than technical leaks, and identifying what we call as the free riders, who are there to take water from their neighbors and they don't pay for it. So this non-revenue water by itself, it creates a better financial status or stability for the water utilities that we're working with. Of course, we shouldn't neglect that working with the people at the water utilities is important. This is why we are introducing efficient management tools, proper financial tools, proper reporting tools. So we're working with them in parallel and in tandem with all the, if we can call them, infrastructure investments that we are doing. At the same time, we're not forgetting the people, because we're trying to instill a culture among the people that it's not only the responsibility of the government to have water. You have to be a responsible consumer. You have to pay, you have to subscribe, you have to use water in a conservative way, and in irrigation, in domestic, and in industrial, or in any commercial place that you have. So there has been a huge program working with the population on awareness, on being responsible, on playing the role of a citizen scientist who can report and connect with the water utility and bridge the gap between them and the population. At the same time, as you know, we have a grant program and a grant portfolio that we manage. And instead of just pushing the grant into awareness and the soft skills, we are having the grant to work for solution implementation. We're having the grants work for sanitation problem solving at the community level. We are working on circular economy, which will last long time after we have left. We're working on the sludge, the fecal sludge. I think we had a video on this before, to transform it into a co-compost. So, and this would last much longer than the project, of course. So this is how we're being a little bit innovative in addressing the crisis while keeping the long-term objective in our minds. And I hope I provided the spice to the.
Of course, we want spice up here. We want to keep it interesting for our audience. We do also recognize that, and we have a great panel here, but there are also people who aren't able to join us. Working in fragile contexts often means that it is even more difficult to get to be able to come join conferences like this, both because of the constantly changing situation and the need to respond, as well as just some of the difficulties in travel that we sometimes face. And so we have a couple of videos of voices from fragile contexts that we want to show you today. So please, let's play those videos now.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this session. My name is Pedro Gado, and I'm joined here with Diego Sevillano, and we would like to present our session regarding Venezuela. It's about the Nexometer approach and to enhance humanitarian WASH programming. 87% of Venezuelans live with daily access to water. And since the beginning of the crisis, this situation has turned upside down, and now approximately 82% of Venezuelans do not receive water continuously, or at least with poor quality. The framework for resilience and fragile context. I think Venezuela, has been facing is called what we call the fragile context, and even though that the humanitarian aid has been struggling to recuperate or restore these services, there's a moment that if the situation does not improve, then the country can also go back to the same situation before. So I think this is what is important to understand, that humanitarian aid just by themselves is not just enough. And we need to focus also on a more resilient approaches and more towards facing some actions towards development to ensure that this country recovers some of the services.
The origins of it. So this common understanding, the technical working group was created in April 2023 with these organizations that work in the country. And for developing the tool, we have used different key documents that they have very important information on what is Nexus, how to contribute to humanitarian development and peace. But one of the key documents that we have found recently that was released on April and on September this year, it was the JOF, the Joint Operational Framework. This document is, it was built with the leading of the Global WASH Cluster and the Water and Sanitation for All organization, and lots of other organizations that contributed to it. It is important because this document gives clear ideas and steps on how to put in practice the Nexus. So the Nexometer also establishes a monitoring ex post after the implementation of the project, which is important to understand if our actions, they still last, and to learn about it. It's important to learn and to capitalize what we have done good in a good way, and what we have to improve in order to build better projects in the future. Then it gives you some graphs in terms of how do we contribute to the operational principles. How do we contribute to respect diversity and context? How we contribute to integrate adaptive management? How we contribute to develop rapid transition mechanisms between crisis phases. So in terms, the bigger it is, it means that we are planning a project that contributes more to this Nexus operational principles. Here we talk about contraction versus expansion. If we have a baseline, for example, and we are starting in a way, and we know the criteria and the activities that we have to follow in order to ensure a proper handover to authorities or to other parties, etc., in theory, this would be a Nexus expansion, as we call it, an important tool, an interesting tool, and a practical tool to implement projects. The partners that they have collaborated to do some pilots and to elaborate the tool, they have the illusion that this is something that can be really useful.
Nigeria Northeast is facing a humanitarian situation exacerbated by army conflicts, which is continues to affect the countries. According to the HNO 2023, approximately 8.3 million of people are in need of humanitarian aid. So, by example, during the year 2021, the work sectors supply emergency water by truck, what we call water trucking. We spend almost $1 million in water trucking. So this is too much, and we need to move to a sustainable situation. We need to move to the Nexus. And also government, we are moving to the Nexus. We developed in Pulka, by example, also a big system for water supply, the small town water chain management by community itself. This is a big project that we are developing currently, and this one is a model of Nexus Humanitarian. So,
sorry for the technical difficulties. We'll try to make sure that that video is available online, but I guess we might continue, recognizing we have not so much time for our panelists. We'll continue with our with the Q&A portion of our panel, and hopefully we can get access to that to you all later. Will, I'm going to turn to you again with the first question for the second part of our panel, and I think just saw some of really great examples of what's happening in countries, and if you could talk to us a little bit more about local ownership and capacity building, and in these contexts. And often we see that there are weakened institutions or weakened governments. And how can we build technical skills? How can we build capacity to enable this work across the Nexus?
Okay, great, thanks. I'll come back to the point around the technical skills, but I think what we need is much more than technical skills, right? I think it's as much around kind of skill sets as it is mindsets as well, in terms of commitment to really strengthening systems in these contexts. So when I started working on the paper, this applying systems in fragile contexts, systems strengthening in fragile contexts, I was collecting some quotes from both on the humanitarian side and the development side from different practitioners. And I got quotes like, how do you strengthen the system when there isn't one, from a development practitioner? And then from a humanitarian colleague, well, what about, the quote was, what if the government is the problem, right? And so it's, so you see that, I think it's clear that there's always a system to strengthen, right? There's always a system, there is services happening. And I think if we don't see that, we need to address that issue of systems blindness. I think looking at, sometimes localization and other things, we often think kind of our minds might drift more to the kind of local NGO type context. But there's a range of different local actors in place, looking at different levels of the system. So you've got your national government, your CSOs, your local government, your water utilities, your market actors, traditional leaders, even the humanitarian system itself and how it interacts. So I think it's important to say, in contexts where there can be real challenges of engaging with some of those actors, it's unlikely that you can't interact and start strengthening some of the others. And so it's about being pragmatic, it's about what you do, when, and with who, I think, and being adaptable. I think in terms of some of the barriers to engaging with the local actors like governments in kind of strengthening country systems, strengthening government capacity in some contexts, and again, massively generalizing here across a range of different contexts. I think that having weak government capacity and weak market systems, is that a rationale to substitute and bypass them, or is it a rationale to strengthen them? And I think for a long time in humanitarian action, I mean, Monica, you'd know this much better than I would, there has been sometimes a bit of a tendency to bypass and substitute. And that kind of brings us into this almost kind of, it's hard to transition out of that, right, to a more development pathway. Again, this is massively generalizing. So I think also with some of the shorter term funding windows, high risk contexts, there can almost be an incentive to continue to do direct implementation rather than more risky implementation with and through local governments, with markets, etc. So of course, I mean, looking at the slide that was shared on the Venezuela one around the framework for sector resilience, looking at the kind of the different almost phases of disaster response, recovery, etc., is clearly in a full-scale humanitarian response, you're not going to start doing systems analysis, building blocks, blah, 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 right? There's a time and a place. But in the relative calm after the storm or before the storm, it's about thinking about what is possible to start looking at strengthening some of these country systems. In terms of briefly, in terms of the humanitarian actors, I think working more with, for example, host governments, I think it's in part about skill sets and mindsets, and I think it's part about the enabling conditions and incentives to do so. So I think looking at where you can bring sector actors together, which is great to hear Monica giving examples of that, bringing actors together from the development and the humanitarian sector, kind of doing a bit of a systems analysis, understanding, removing some of that systems blindness, but also having conversations around, at the moment, how connected is the humanitarian and development activities? Is some humanitarian action actually inadvertently undermining the strengthening of the system or the market, etc.? And what could be done to kind of do no harm to markets and to the system and to prospects of sustainability to create that dialogue? So I think there's a lot of opportunities to strengthen the kind of the skill sets and the mindsets around capacity development, etc., and maybe starting with ourselves. And then I think also finally some of those kind of enabling conditions, longer term, slightly longer term funding, a bit more focus on the outcomes than the outputs, a little bit more adaptability in these contexts really provides the enabling conditions. And how can you incentivize it? How can donors require a kind of root cause analysis, systems analysis within proposals or within the inception phase? And really, what's the opportunity to kind of build some of those incentives to do market-friendly procurement rather than bulk supply, etc. So yeah, to conclude, I think there's some great progress moving, but it is quite hard and it needs a nuanced approach. Thanks.
Thanks, Will, and thanks for bringing us back from it's not just technical skills, it's meaningful participation in decision-making, it's those local voices. Thank you very much. George, can you talk about how research can assist? We're here at a conference about research and policy, and so how can research assist with improving sustainability across the humanitarian development peace nexus?
Well, I'm not in the research field. Maybe Haseeb can help you more. But definitely research is the basics of everything. It's the only place where we can have evidence-based data that could guide our planning. Guiding our planning is essential in actually not only responding to the needs of where we are, but actually planning for an exit strategy. Which is the sustainable problem, exit strategy. How do we plan for it? How do we exit with something that we don't leave behind as a burden? So research and data has played a major role in our, at least, functioning. And by that, we transmit the same experience to the water utilities that we work with by actually helping them start to generate data. And I mentioned non-revenue water. The way we're doing it is we're actually reading meters and we're actually studying data and consumption patterns. And by that, it has helped us make a major shift from the ongoing policy of water supply management into a policy of water demand management. So why are you pumping 5,000 cubic meter a second or an hour if you only need 2,000? This is cost, this is non-revenue water. So I think research can also build the tools that are more affordable to fragile states. Because now we go into an ERP system to install in a water utility. It's $25,000. It's a license of $25,000 that no utility can pay. Now, utilities in Lebanon have no access to foreign currency. So with what currency are they going to pay Microsoft or I'm not doing any publicity here, but it's a major burden. And without those tools, you cannot work. So research can actually focus on developing tools that are accessible and usable by semi-developed water utilities. I'm not talking about starting from the zero premise. So I think it's a major focus that can help the actual practical implementation of things in the field. And if you want me to talk about exit strategy, I can still talk about it. Thank you.
Well, speaking of exit strategies, we have to get to an exit from the panel so that we have time for our Q&A. So we will have one last question to Haseeb, and please do come up to the microphones or prepare your questions so that we can hear from you as our audience as well. Haseeb, could you build a little bit upon that? What do you think of that? Is that a good way for research to be applicable to the Nexus, or would you like to respond to George on that?
Sure, definitely. As Well also mentioned earlier about gap in system and strengthening the system, here where research come into play. Research institutes can play a pivotal role in contributing to sustainable system development. And that's only possible through partnership and funding. Forging partnership with government, with donors, with NGOs to access funds and dedicate that fund to research institutes so that they can implement research. Back in Afghanistan in 2021, I plan to do some research related to different environmental issues that we were facing. We prepared a concept proposal for those research related to air quality and its impact on health, impact of mining on water and surface water and groundwater, climate-induced migration, and so on. And we talked with donors, NGOs, and eventually we managed to secure a good amount of funding from these institutes, NGOs and donors. We talked with universities to implement this research, and we got them on board, and they started conducting this research. The other important point is the cross sector research collaboration. We can bring multiple actors together, researchers together, experts from different fields to do research. Currently, mostly researchers, they're involved in doing research in a specialized field that they are, but and when we are talking about Nexus, when we are talking about system, we need multidisciplinary kind of research. And lastly, we need to change the education system as well, particularly in terms of university, bringing more integrated kind of programs within university curriculum as well. Because the current kind of traditional existing programs that universities have, they are specialized, and the kind of workforce, the mentality, the kind of skills that will be needed, integrated kind of mindset for now and future. We need that kind of workforce so that we can have then tackle these multifaceted challenges. A good perfect example that I can give is the peace engineering program which is implemented by Drexel University. The aim of the program is to reduce or to prevent conflicts through research and education. The program brings together, combines together different fields. And it's a master program, and it's implemented right now. It's a newly program. It has been like for the past few years. but different field, technology, water, law, policy, and economic, they are all like students, they are taking courses from these different fields, and then they are doing the research and conflict fragile environment. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm not, oh, we have an online question. Wonderful.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, there's a much more vibrant conversation going on online this morning. And maybe I'll just start with two of the questions. One is, what are the unique challenges associated with sanitation in humanitarian settings, and what we need to think about to respond to those types of challenges? And then the second one, which builds a little bit off of, I think, the video that we saw from Venezuela, which is there a need or a value in building conflict-resilient WASH in areas that frequently experience conflict? So rather than continually going back and reestablishing these services, are the things that we need to do to build more resilient services that could survive conflict and be more quickly brought back up online?
Great, thank you. And we'll take one online question, or one in-person question, and then we'll answer across.
Thank you, everyone. My question is almost in line with the second question that you just read out. Looking at the Venezuela chat, where everything went down until WASH intervention came in, and then it started picking up again. So considering what the world is currently experiencing and the rumors of World War III, possible World War III across the globe, with the rising tension in the Middle East and Ukraine and Russia, and the tension between the United States, China, and other world leaders, it's my question will be, what are the plans by WASH to get the world ready for such possibilities, whereby some of those communities that are mostly more vulnerable to experience those crises will be ready to have access to water continuously, rather than WASH coming in when everything is about going down, and then helping them. No, just like the question said, what are the plans to build a resilient system that will withstand crises and make sure water is readily available, even though there might be power outage, but they can still access clean water with the systems that have been built. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Monica, I'm going to turn to you first. Can you answer kind of our joint question, both from our online as well as in person?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Sure. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you. I think that obviously the focus on conflict and the need for us to look at how systems themselves are functioning, how they can be resilient, is very important. But I think the underlining there is really, and I think to the point to the individual in the room, is really we need to think about the international humanitarian law, because those are violations that are taking place. And while in most settings we do have the ability to provide services continuously, there are times that we are breaching upon violations of protection of civilian workers who would be helping to ensure that those systems maintain themselves and are able to function, and also withholding of basic services because of things like fuel not being readily available. So I think that any system can have a variety of backups and alternatives, but ultimately when we do reach that tipping point, that crisis tipping point, then it really does become a matter of advocacy, but also registering violations and ensuring that that is elevated to the level that it should be. So I think it's a bit of a tricky one, because it steps out, and I think you were mentioning this, Hassan, the need that this goes beyond just WASH technical, the need for the international law to come in, the need for potentially economics to come in. So I think it's something that on a small scale, we can think about how to avoid groups that are living within close proximity because of conflict. I think very much of whether that be an IDP, someone who's been internally displaced, or a refugee potentially moving into a host community, and there can be tensions over those basic water resources. And I think we can definitely address that as a humanitarians with support from development and peace actors. But I think when we reach a certain scope, scale, and size where it does become an actual citable violation, that's where we do need to work with colleagues who are working in international law as well as protection to make sure that we're able to provide those basic services and not withhold it from those that need it most. Can I stop there, Tracy?
Great, thank you so much, Monica. And George, I know on sanitation, I believe there was some specific work with wastewater and sanitation, so maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, the question was mainly on the unique challenges on sanitation, right? I mean, in the context where we're working, as I said, you have a double your population living in informal settlements that you need to collect their sanitation, you need to manage sanitation in these. Where do you go? How do you suck them out? Where do you dump them? So you need to work on a whole system of collecting, tracking, and then discharging in wastewater treatment plants. And then you go to the wastewater treatment plants, and the challenge there is who's running them? Who's paying to run them? There's no one. The water establishments are not being able to run the wastewater treatment plants. Hence, one of the responses we have is O&M funds to run a few very critical wastewater treatment plants that we have to let the business keep running and the service being provided. Another thing is the infrastructure, because not everyone is connected to wastewater, and people tend to just dump them next to their houses. And then now you have to build a whole program of awareness on septic tanks, and then work on a system that I mentioned, the social implementation of a sanitation management plan at the local community, with a suction truck, and then dealing with the water establishment, and then paying for the discharge, so that what you're discharging is not also being dumped in a polluting manner. Last but not least is sludge management. There's no policies about what to do with the sludge. What is allowed to do with the sludge? We don't have standards yet. So we're working with the National Standard Institution, and we're adopting some of the WHO and the FAO for the co-composting, and we are testing the grant that we did on converting fecal sludge into actually co-composting product that we can use, or actually able to dump in the landfills that we can use as a layer between one and the other. So it's a whole integrated system that is run, and over and above all this, we don't have a tariff for wastewater. So if you're not collecting money for this service, how are you going to run it? It's devastating.
Thank you. And I know we could all continue this conversation. I'd love to talk to you all more, but I recognize we are standing between lunch. So if we have a couple of takeaways from this session, I think we heard about really the importance of working across all these areas, and that humanitarian and development and peace actors need to work together, that there are really good examples of coordination and frameworks and things that we can use. We have examples of successes, and we need to recognize that we can take ideas and work together, but we can't just plop down the same solutions across contexts, and we do need to adapt what we are doing to work in fragile contexts. And there's a role for all of us, whether we are researchers or policy or donors or implementers, and that will only achieve success by all working together. So thank you very much, and we'll turn back over to Kata.
Can you thank the panel again for their traveling all this way. Thank you to George for coming from Lebanon, and for Tracy Wise, who stepped in to take the position of the original moderator, but you did a fantastic job, so thank you, Tracy. And we'll ask the panel, if you have questions for the panel, feel free to stick around after, and they'll be willing to talk to you and grab lunch with you. And so, again, if you wouldn't mind sticking around and having a bit more conversation with us. Okay, so like Tracy said, we're standing between you and lunch, and that's a dangerous place to be, but I wanted to make some announcements, which is there are 2 lunch areas, and so one is obviously the Trillium dining room, and so please make your way to the Trillium dining room lineup. But there's also a secondary lineup upstairs, an eating area upstairs for all of you, and some of them are racing to the door already. I also wanted to mention that there are 3 lunch sessions that happen from 12:15 to 1:15, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so if you're interested in technology innovations and apps that have come out and water filters and seeing those new technologies, please attend the technology showcase, and that will be, I believe, in the Willow Lounge. And then if you're interested in the Young Professionals lunch series, that will be in Magnolia Lounge. And then if you want to go to the lunch special, I think if you look in your program, it will be hosted today by Dig Deep. And so please get in the Trillium lineup and get your lunch plate and take it to the room. There will be drinks and desserts served in the back room. So just line up for your plate and then you can go to the room immediately. And then today, if you identify as young, or if you identify as professional, or if you're neither, you're still welcome to the Young Professionals. Today will be focused on how AI can support WASH. And so we will have 2 of our scientists leading those conversations today. And then after lunch, we will be hosting the CAPI lecture here in the Grumman Auditorium. So come back at 1:30 to hear Dr. Ye talk about the new generator resource recovery machine. And again, our workshops or the side events start at 1:30, and our verbal presentations begin at 3:30, and the poster reception begins at 4:45 and goes till 6 o'clock. So make sure you come back for all of these sessions and stay with us all day. Just a reminder, I know you're all getting hungry, I'm sorry. We've got plenary sessions tomorrow, another plenary session on Thursday, so join us for those. And then on Friday, we have an interview with Sarosh Jha. So please make sure you stick around till Friday. And then a reminder to all of you who are staying for the conference dinner, it is tomorrow evening starting at 6, and we will have the Unsustainables band and Mapleview Farms ice cream and a Zim Zoom photo booth, and it's a chance to network and get to know other people and to have a bit of fun. And so join us for that. Don't forget to thank our sponsors. We thank them every day and every chance we can, especially to Osprey Foundation, the Hilton Foundation, World Vision, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all of the folks who sponsored this conference and made it possible. So thank you to each and every one of you. And our event sponsors as well, thank you for your contribution. And that is it. Go and enjoy your lunch and have a great day.